Hello and welcome, dear friends. This is Lit ECT, the YouTube channel that brings exciting, important, and relevant matter helping you in your exams like NTA, NET, English. Dear friends, today we will discuss about a recent and very important dimension of critical theory, that is subaltern studies. In this video I would like to explain some concepts related with subaltern studies and major works that are contributed in this particular recent field of study. Okay friends, first of all, now let's understand what is subaltern studies. Dear friends, subaltern studies is a recent theoretical development and it is basically inspired by the works and ideas of Marxist thinkers, especially Antonio Gramsci. Dear friends, if we talk about this theory, initially it was limited to the writings on South Asian history and society, and it was published under the editorship of Ranajit Guha that appeared annually from 1982 to 1989 in a journal which was titled Subaltern Studies. This is the name of the journal also, in which many writers contributed their works related with the revision of history, especially of South Asia. Now, Guha edited the first 6 volumes of the Subaltern Studies. The next 5 volumes were edited by other associated scholars and we can say interested persons. They all were basically, we can say they all were following the path of Ranajit Guha, and that is why Ranajit Guha is considered as the founder, as the main proponent, promoter of this particular school. Friends, right from the beginning, the subaltern studies argued that the entire tradition of Indian historiography, that is the writing of history, has an elitist bias. Now, elitist bias, we can understand that this history writing is not neutral, we can say an attempt. It is basically prejudiced. It has certain bias against a particular class and it supports a particular class. So, what is subaltern studies? It is a revisionist project. It is a revision of the documentation of Indian history. The focus is on the marginalized and forgotten class, ignored class, those that were not included in the official documentation of Indian history. It is also an effort to create a counter narrative of the academic history. So we have an academic history which is verified by the government institution, which is promoted by all the high education institutes and academic institutes, but they do not include certain aspects of history, and that is why subaltern studies do their revision and try to bring a counter narrative of the official history. Now, the first use, if we go back to the etymology of the term, the first use of the term subaltern in this Marxist or social context is ascribed to neo-Marxist Antonio Gramsci, who used it in his prison diaries. Gramsci wrote about the poor condition of the peasantry and he used the term subaltern interchangeably with the term subordinate. So this can give you idea what does subaltern means. It means a kind of subordinate or a kind of we can say a person who is not in the main line. For the class that is subjected to the hegemony of the ruling class or the dominant. So there is a ruling class, there is a dominant, and it is basically dominant that decide what should be included in history and what is excluded. The term subaltern in critical theory thus refer to certain groups, people who were excluded, who are excluded, who are marginalized, who are ignored on the bias, on the basis of some categorization, which is social construct like gender, class, race, sexuality, or nation. These are some biases, these are some social constructs on the basis of which certain classes have dominance and the other classes or the counter classes, they are put on the periphery. Guha sees this subalternity as the general attribute of subordination in South Asian society, whether this is expressed in terms of class, caste, age, gender, office, or in any other way. So according to Guha, it is not a specific case, it is the general attribute. Now, subaltern studies movement, it began as a kind of reaction against certain nationalistic and traditional cultural values which were summed up as Sanskritized Vedantic tradition, which is considered to be elitist, which prefer certain caste and certain groups to be valid, to be authentic, and which put other groups out of this particular social context, because this Vedantic tradition, it promoted itself as the normative or standard nationalistic values. Soon subaltern studies become the new history from below. History from the below is an important phrase in this context, which makes that those people who were put under the cover, who were totally ignored, they become vociferous. Their voices were soon heard, and they did not try to fuse these people history with the official nationalism. So now there is two parts. One is people history, which is promoted by subaltern studies, and there is official nationalism, which is part of an elitist project. Now, the existing version of history discounted, it ignored subaltern contributions, and so the subaltern studies group sought to rectify the elitist bias in the field dominated by elitism, colonialist elitism, and bourgeois nationalist elitism. So both type of elitism, even the British, when they recorded Indian history, they had certain bias towards certain class and people, and after independence, it is the national elitism which once again pick certain we can say class, race, and put them on the periphery, out of the social reach. And what can be called the manifesto of Project Ranajit Guha in the very first volume of Subaltern Studies states or declares the historiography of Indian nationalism has for a long time been dominated by elitism, colonialist elitism, and bourgeois nationalist elitism. So this is basically manifesto. Subaltern Studies is an attempt to redo, to rediscover, to revision this kind of, and to clear and to remove this bias from the documentation archive of history. The prominent critics of the subaltern studies, please pay attention to this slide. The names are Shahid Amin, David Arnold, Gautam Bhadra, Dipesh Chakravarty, Partha Chatterjee, David Hardman, Gyanendra Pandey, and Sumit Sarkar. These are the critics, some of them based in Oxford and some of them at Calcutta. They all contributed, they all did their research going to social arenas and bringing some we can say eye-opening results. Now we will discuss some important works related with subaltern studies. The very first work is Ranajit Guha's Elementary Aspects of Peasant Insurgency in Colonial India. Now Guha in his book emphasized that tribal revolts inside a subaltern space were disconnected, were totally unaffected from nationalism. According to him, there were peasant revolts and there were a nationalistic revolt or rebellion against English, and they both cannot be joined by one particular discourse or propaganda. In fact, this is a powerful interventionist work, and it tries to recover the peasant from elite projects and positivist historiography. Because in these elite projects, peasants are shown dependent or totally subordinate to the nationalistic wave. On the other hand, Ranajit Guha's point is that peasants were themselves self-sufficient and their revolt were much than what is presented. Guha points out not only the bias of the historiography of colonial India's government document, which was done by the British government, but also the bias of the folklore, which has traditionally been perceived by nationalist groups as authentic. Even these folklore, they try to be blind towards these peasant insurgencies, which were quite effective and we can say independent in their presentation. Guha's intervention is to trace everyday action that are silenced in favor of larger event. He rejects the notion that Indian colonial subjects were powerless during the colonial rule, specifically from 1783 to 1900. So almost these 120 years, he points out there were many rebellions, there were many incidents of individual and group rebellion that were either forgotten or ignored when they were put in contrast to some great larger event. Ranajit Guha tries to recover these effective rebellions from the oblivion of the history. The second work is by Dipesh Chakravarty, Provincializing Europe, which reinvestigate the writing of Indian histories. Both India and Europe are hyper-real imaginary constructs created with Eurocentric values, which means that Europe is put at the center and Europe is put as the complete, the whole, while India is shown as subordinate or dependent upon the European counterpart. Europe symbolizes a completeness, a modernity, and thus positing India as a symbol of lack, historical primitivism, and peasantry. Now, Chakravarty proposes a very important model, provincialization of Europe, a move which tries to incorporate, which tries to include feminist, post-structural, late Marxist theory in order to better understand the marginalized voices that have been relegated, that have been put behind, that have been pushed outside to the subaltern position in the history. Then we have Shahid Amin's Event Metaphor Memory, which examines the infamous 1922 arson of Chauri Chaura Thana, a mob of peasants enacted in the name of Gandhi. Shahid Amin tries to recreate the scene and find out the truth behind the influence of Gandhi on this particular event. Amin seeks to examine the circumstances and context surrounding the actual Chauri Chaura rather than the event that has become synonymous with nationalism. Then we have Gyanendra Pandey's Unarchived Histories, the Mad and the Trifling in the Post-Colonial World, which tries to inspect the official archives, which he remarks is not only a space of remembering where we try to remember our history, but it is also at the same time a project of forgetting, because whatever we do not include in these official archives, we tend to forget about people who are deemed trivial, inconsequential, and thus unhistorical. Pandey underlines how the commonplace that happens so often in every day that it is forgettable. For example, domestic abuse, domestic labor, and issues concerning women in lower caste and classes. Gyanendra Pandey is of the point that such acts are so forgettable that even the women writing the narrative either forgets or ignores to include them in her discourse. This is how he tries to once again bring to the fore those people, those mad, those trivial things which have been silenced forever. Okay, dear friends, that's all for today's lesson. I hope you now get the basic meaning of subaltern studies along with all the major works and theories associated with this. This is rather a very important topic and it will definitely going to help you in your exam. Keep supporting. Thank you, friends.